assembly of. We are really lucky now, and we are very, very thankful for this opportunity to the European Association of Health Law, with which our university has cooperation. I'm very pleased. In addition to Polish camp, your lecture is watched, and healthcare professionals and legal professionals. So we are eager to listen to you, and you are given the floor.
Okay, thank you so much for your kind. It's a real pleasure to be with all of you regarding topics as artificial intelligence. So discuss with you this space has changed the way that some challenges and concerns patient rights are going to be conceived in a different way than the traditional one. Well, this is a very huge topic, a very broad topic, patient rights in the era of artificial intelligence. So I wanted to refer to three important topics. Just we could be speaking here for hours. So I selected the way that in the right to healthcare. First, right to confidentiality in light of the case. I would like to finish with some references to neuro right, how neurotechnologies are in some way. For sure, after my presentation, please feel free to make any kind of question. All of them are much more than welcome. Idea I would like to say is that artificial intelligence is changing the way that the right to healthcare is you know that the medical patient relationship is vertical. They are not in the same position, and this was traditionally, but I would say that digitalization is also reinforcing the verticality within the relationship between physicians. I'd like to share with you some ideas regarding the way that artificial impact the right to health. Well, for sure, artificial intelligence is representing many different opportunities. We have to be aware of the opportunity by algorithms are allowed. These opportunities first are field the improve the prevention and diagnosis of diseases, and at the same time, second point, it will allow personalized medicine, just because thanks to artificial treatments, this means that each patient his or her single treatment. Also opportunities for the pharmaceutical sector, yes, because new drugs will be discovered thanks to artificial intelligence and the application of big data, just because particular drug, all the inputs on genetics of patients, diseases of patients, and lifestyle of patients. There are many other opportunities, such as possibility of avoiding adverse effects from medicines, and also we will be able to optimize clinical trials that will be much more effective, just because we use the number of clinical trials, the patients will and also researchers will be able to monitor clinical trials in real time. And also advantages for the innovation sector, just because we, thanks to will be able to create digital apps in sort with the industry collaboration, just because pharma companies will be using health data space to work in cooperation, insurance companies, firms, or scientists. These benefits or opportunities that artificial intelligence is representing for the healthcare sector. But at the same time, we have to be aware of the risk. And in this regard, I would like to share with you three types of artificial intelligence healthcare sector. First, we have conventional AI. Second, generative AI that emerged in November 2022. And we have a third type of artificial intelligence that is really interesting for purposes, which is hypothesis driven. Well, you know perfectly well which is the difference. Traditionally, we have convention which classifies the inputs we give system. So really, in medicine, the real change is the emergence of generative AI. That means that from existing data, the system is creating a unique and original content, both with text, both with imaging, both with audio, video, or code. And this artificial intelligence system in November 2022. Well, that new type of artificial intelligence has been created. All of us are used to deal with generative AI, but right now, hot topic is hypothesis-driven AI. This is being created by bioclinics, and it's a new class of artificial intelligence invented for offering an innovative way to discover complex causes of cancer and to improve treatment strategies. This is also the main differences is that conventional AI outcomes from databases and hypothesis-driven AI giving us outcomes, but hypothesis into the algorithm. So on the one hand, it's more dangerous just because scientific hypothesis and doctrine is more subjective, but at the same time, if we can the biases, it's very likely that the result is going. So this is the point where hello. Well, these are the benefits of hypothesis-driven AI, focus on a specific hypothesis or questions, leverages knowledge to find previously missed connection, requires less data and computing power, and helps scientists to test and validate incorporating these. Well, these are the benefits of this type of AI. So in some way, you will be able to see that it includes broad areas of impact, experimental design, the integration of domain specific knowledge, and so on. So the issue is, and in this regard, it say that the Artificial Intelligence Act at the European Union level in 2024 is the first regulation on AI, but this is false just because we have 3 precedents. Order of President Biden that was adopted in 2023, it just standardized evaluation and for the protection of civil rights and freedoms. Afterwards, we have in 2024 the data protection and digital information. And also it's very important just because it affects directly Ukraine, human rights, democracy, and rule of law of 2024 at the Council of Europe level. This is the framework convention that is not that applicable, but it states and lays down minimum common standards regarding dealing distance in general terms. Well, that in terms of innovation, United States innovates, China copies, and Europe regulates. So between innovation and regulation at some point. And in this regard, it's to reflect that right now, United States have. Here you can see when his first day at office, and one of the norms who he was signing was the executive order of 2023. This means intelligence has no regulation at the United States. Trump was repealing executive order of President Biden. So this is a very important from a geopolitical point of view, that in terms of regulation, there is a huge gap right now in the United States that is impacting the way that intelligence is being implemented at European level. Just because we have lots of norms, but United States has no norms right now. So the issue, the hot topic, the tricky question right now here is how to balance regulation in Europe and non-regulation, just because, you know, most of artificial to Europe. And I would like to share with you some. It's important that artificial intelligence was in the European agenda from the very beginning. If you speech from Ursula von der Leyen in 2009, he said very explicitly that in my 101st days in office, I for a coordinated European approach on the intelligence. So it wasn't in her first 100-day office. That's because it took a little bit more. It was because the artificial intelligence regulation was adopted in 5 years later. Right now, we have a regulation at the European level regarding artificial intelligence. Here you have the norm, but at the same time, I would like to say a few regulation on artificial intelligence. The first idea I would like to share with you is that of intersections that have not been solved yet. Just because artificial intelligence in the healthcare sector has intersections. 2017, the European Health Space of 2016, the Data Governance 21, and the Directive for Product Liability. Artificial intelligence is a medical device. In this regard, the main problem right now we have is that it's obsolete. Here you have news from the media that states that hard-fought provision of the AI Act could become obsolete to experts. That's why it's very important that we're not hard law, but soft law. And in this regard, I do recommend, if you want to see how artificial intelligence can be implemented at the European level, the AI approved within the use and EU trade and well, that's artificial intelligence is creating norms regarding intellectual property rights. So this is one of the gaps right now we are realizing, and this is what's provoking that the musical industry regulation. Here you have the news from Paul McCartney says that changing law over AI would rip off artists. So this is in the obsolescence of the AI regulation. Some leads AI 2 doesn't apply to research and development systems. A system is specifically developed for the sole research and development projects. This we can use artificial intelligence as a pilot, but not with commercial purposes. So in such a case, that act is not applied. And also domestic uses, AI system used by natural person in the course of a purely personal non-professional activity is also of the scope of application. Well, here you have the entry into force. Right now is since 1st of 2024, and it will be fully applicable 2 years later, I mean, just 2 months, to August of 2026, that I cannot list right now. Well, this is the legal framework, the legal situation. I am reviewing the legal situation. First, we have Artificial Intelligence Act at the EU level, and this is a tricky situation that is emerged. First one is that concern regarding the data. You have news from the world. The Nightingale gathers personal health data on millions of Americans. In this regard, also you have from the Guardian, Google secret cache of medical data, including full details of millions, according to a whistleblower. The same news, so it's rather split the world, you know. Well, this situation provoked some concerns from the European Parliament, and it is very important, adopted in 2017 regarding fundamental rights implications of big data. By that time, the most used word, the most used expression was big data, but you're not perfect. And artificial intelligence are two sides of the same coin. You need big data in order to make artificial intelligence possible. Without high quality data and massive data, it's not possible to have real outcomes. So let me share with you concerns regarding this new situation. First of all, is discrimination. This being underlined by the potential discrimination in using AI for making decisions. Well, for sure, artificial intelligence always have a bias. According to European Parliament and most, there should be some ways of minimizing risk of discrimination by three means. First of all, explaining how algorithms were built in order to recognize these applications. Second, it's compulsory to assess the impact of potential biases resulting from algorithms. And last but not, it is necessary to assess quality of data collected. This is the first risk, discrimination. So we need security. I'm not going to provide more details regarding lack of security just because it's a topic. I would like to detail a third risk, which is lack of accuracy. It's very important to keep in mind that predictive analysis sometimes can only offer a statistical probability. So it's very important to clearly distinguish causality and causality that are not exactly the same. When some causality, this is the so-called spurious correlations that are based on causality. I have some funny examples. In this slide, you can see people who drowned by falling into a pool. Correlates exactly with the number of films that Nicolas Cage appeared in. So according to decision-making on artificial, one may wonder that if Nicolas Cage is appearing on, let's go back home, yes, there's a serious risk of being drawn by falling into. There are many of these slides that demonstrate that this is just a spurious correlation. Here you have another one. It's exactly with the per capita consumption of margarine. So if someone get divorced, just eat margarine. In such a case, the probabilities of being divorced are increasingly consequently. It's just a joke, but please, through data from, there is a very funny correlation. Okay, and well, we have and hot objects. Well, what I want to transmit you, what I want to mean is that clearly distinguish which is causality, which is causality. These three slides, causality based on data. The next risk I'd like to underline is the lack of knowledge, just because of very poor knowledge and understanding about artificial. Another funny example, the so-called King Herod clause. This was an experiment in London in 2024, in 2014, sorry. And the issue was very simple. Some people wanted to get connected, point, but the Herod clause. And the Herod clause said that you will be allowed to use flight, but only if the recipients agree to deliver his or her child as a slave to the supplier company. And for sure, 66 people registered in just 2 minutes. This demonstrates main legal basis in order to process data. And last, I would like to underline also the loss of control of AI system. In this regard, the recommended the inclusion of a kill switch buttons on all robots, just because in such a case they will be able to be deactivated when threatening the life of a human being. Here you have some examples. For example, Facebook artificial intelligence robots, soon they start talking to each other. It's important that we have to have some mechanisms in order to avoid the possibility of AI systems. It's a very, well, I would say, a strange possibility right now, but this is a safeguard that should be taken. Even the engineers had a very particular relationship with the robot, who that an AI has become sentient. Okay. To the regulation, I mean, would like to remark the system is based on a risk approach. So the AI define 4 levels of risk. The first level of risk is, this means that, for example, using an AI for detecting who could be more likely is unacceptable and therefore needed. The second level is high risk. High risk means that before implementing artificial intelligence systems, the deployers have to make possible a situation of fundamental rights impact. All the AI systems are high risk systems. In such a case, the only obligation is transparent. For example, a chatbot is a limited risk artificial intelligence system, and at least we have minimal risk. That means that there is no obligation from that point. Well, it's important to note, I think that this slide is very important, just because the artificial intelligence regulation is affecting the healthcare sector, but it depends on the type of AI system. When we are talking systems that are medical devices, and when talking about medical devices, I'm referring to those who are necessary for diagnosis and treatment. In such a case, the AI Act is not applicable, and we have just to apply the medical devices regulation. So when the AI systems are medical device for treatment purposes, the will not, and only the MDR will be applicable. That means that a conformity assessment is needed. So when the Artificial Intelligence Act is applicable, it has a very small scope of application, just because it applies AI systems that are not considered as medical devices. And the in triage systems in emergency, just because it's supposed that triage is not a type of like, it has an autonomy regarding the MDR, and that's why triage systems is considered a non-medical device, and this is why it has to the artificial intelligence systems. Which is the real impact of being subject to the Artificial Intelligence Act? Well, in this case, a conformity assessment will not be but fundamental rights impact as conducted by deployers, both in the private one. Let me check something about how this works in concrete. For example, let's imagine a Socratic chatbot based on generative AI. This is very typical right now in many, because you can have a chat with a chatbot, and it's very convenient, for example, for psychiatric mental disorder patients. Example that this is not under the of the MDR, just because this psychotic chatbot is just a conversation between the robot and not used with. So this means that this psychotic chatbot is under the umbrella of Artificial Intelligence Act, just because this is not a medical. We have a different example, a system for predicting cancer patients' response to immunotherapy. this is a medical device just because it's diagnosis purpose. So that means that it's under the umbrella of the MDR, of the medical device, not under the umbrella of the AI Act. Many different examples. For example, AI assisted reading of maps. This is a medical device. That means that it's a scope of the MDR and not the AI regulation. Here you have news, AI supported mammogram reading detects 20% more cancers. Other example, this is not a medical device just because it's an AI system for emergency call classification. Just keep in mind that if the AI system is a medical device and be to have diagnosis and treatment purposes, it falls under the scope of the MDR, the medical device regulation. And this is very have to get a CE marking that needs a previous conformity assessment. When the AI system is not a medical, is falling under this case, for example, for classifying the calls. Also, for example, AI systems for patient triage in the emergency department. Well, some takeaways from this first part. I'd like to highlight there is a myth regarding AI systems of healthcare. Everybody is that there is a new regulation on artificial intelligence for regulation, but it's very important that most of AIs are not under the umbrella of AI Act, just because most of them are medical devices, and this means that they are under the umbrella of the MDR. Second, we need a new regulation. One is not taking into account the generative AI. Third, we are missing some intersection with other norms that I was mentioning before, as the GDPR, European Health and Space, and so on. Third, there are some gaps. For example, a right to explanation, and that the medical decision have been made with meaningful information provided by the AI system. Well, this is not really clear, just because it's clear just in the AI regulation, the right to be explained, but not applicable to a healthcare system treatment, treatment and diagnosis purposes. There is no real law topic in the health has such a right, but it's important to explicitly embed such in the current legal framework. And for sure, there are future challenges regarding this topic. Could AI system cheating us? Could it to cheat us? Are we able to fall in love with AI systems? What I mean is that occur right now, and I am missing some crucial point mentioning before. Just that as takeout. The second part of my presentation is regarding the right to equality in light of the European Health Space that is also affecting patient rights in a very huge way. Well, you know that there are two types of data use, two types. Electronic health data, which is providing healthcare the original way, and we have also secondary use of electronic health data. When I'm talking about data, specifically referring to electronic data, just because are the only ones which are operable. So the most important idea to keep in mind right now is that, of course, we are collecting data just for providing healthcare. This is primary use, but these data are a very important source of the progress of biomedicine, just because all the purposes the society as a whole. I can use patient data for research, for innovation, for policy making, for patient safety, for medicine, as I was mentioning before, for official statistics, regulatory activity. The use of data that to patient rights is necessary. And this is because data are no longer mere reminders of the clinical process. They have become the main source of knowledge of biomedicine, but for this purpose, we don't need data. We need big data. Otherwise, the result is going to be useful. So data, when 5 years are applicable, we need not just a few amount of data, huge data sets, variety, not a very specific collective. We need data from many different sources. Velocity, this data has to be processed in a very fast way. Validity, this data has to good outcomes, and value represent an added value regarding the disease of patients. The challenge, and for sure there will be, because these will represent benefits for researchers and innovators, and this also would benefit patients, assistant in savings thanks to medical products and better decision making. Well, there are many sources regarding data. Wearable devices, and it's underlined, it's red colored, the main source of electronic records of patients. So this brings to me to the same question: how should we handle this situation in shift in the GDPR that was based on the Helsinki model? The Helsinki model was primacy of privacy, autonomy of the data subject. That's why the traditional model only allowed the processing of possibility were met or consent used for further purposes, or in such a case, data are no longer personal data just because we don't know who is the owner of the data. But model, there are 3 windows of opportunity that. First of all is pseudonymization. In this regard, it's important to clearly distinguish that pseudonymization with anonymity means that the separation between possible that codifies data of patients, and in this regard, some specific and prospective research will be possible just because we will be able to follow up the evolution of patients. So this is a very important. In anonymization, there is no longer once we separate personal data to clinical data, there's no possibility. But with pseudonymization, the name of patients is not known by researchers, but is known by a third party independent of the. And in this regard, is much more convenient just because we will be able to use this data for further research. We have also broad consent and secondary use, but I don't have time enough for developing these issues. But the most important thing to keep in mind that pseudonymization is opening a new big data possible. Well, here you have, in this regard, the difference between right to privacy and right to data protection, because many times scholars are using both rights in the same way, and they are radically different. Just because privacy only involves negative obligations and non-interference rights, privacy is the sphere of my particular autonomy that cannot be interfered. When talking data protection, the right to data protection, we have to be aware that it's something broader, just because it involves both negative and positive obligation. The right to data protection functioning of the European Union is by public interest resources. So in the balance between my private and the possible benefit to society, we have to balance this situation. In specific cases, it is perfectly allowed to your data. You know that according to the GDPR, the general rule is that processing is prohibited, but an exception where consent is not applicable. Reasons of substantial public interest, diagnosis or treatment management of healthcare systems, public health, for example, it was possible the sharing of data for public health reasons, and all when the use of has scientific research purpose in accordance to Article 89. Consent is really difficult to collect just lots of individuals in order to make big data possible. There's always a possibility for research purposes. And that's why pseudonymization is really the window opportunity that the GDPR is representing. I'm going to skip. I'd like to share with you why the use of health standard of the electronic clinical record are not exactly the same, and there is a limited interoperability. This is a technical barrier. This is not for lawyers, but there are some legal barriers at the EU level, the Council of Europe level as well, about what's considered secondary use. And there's another important implemented and interpreted by member states, just because keep in mind that the GDPR has a double option for member states. Well, option number one is maintaining the GDPR conditions, or option number two is introduce further conditions, including limitations. And some member states different limits to the GDPR model. That means that the current legal framework is fragmented in some way. Now, based on the data governance, ruling the data sharing, fostering data quality, and enforcing infrastructure and interoperability. And I would like to share with you how the European, because we have a data subject, this is the patient, a data hospital association, which has the obligation use. I'm going to skip also this slide, just because I would like to share with you that European data space is not an autonomous legal basis. It could be considered that it's a legal basis because the European regulation said that health data access this chapter, but this is not really highway. The applicant has to fulfill the requirements of Article 6 of the GDPR. Consent. Yeah, if there is a legal basis according to Article 9 of the GDPR. Well, the some of the European health data space is a type of compromise between the Commission and the European Parliament, because at the very beginning, the Commission was trying to promote secondary use and this process data. That there should be an opt-out rule. This means that member states can allow patients to opt out on the use of their health data, except for the purposes of public interest, policy making, statistics, or research purposes. So that means that by definitions, all of us could be processed for these purposes, unless you say that you don't want to be used for this. For going further, two important concluding duty we have in order to make. Second, from a legal view, changing but that may should be when at the private interest. What to do? I have a sentence that states that in dubio pro rejus, invitation. So I employ this sentence in order to foster a new pro-research approach. To make and fostering innovation on hand. A very old is lunar of data. Patients are many different players like IT systems work, are translating the information provided by considered in terms of property. What I would like to insist is that the relationship between by their confidentiality. Really new to the two previous parts. That has been discussed in the doctrine. I will have inputs regarding this topic. Put the focus on the most on people's character. Feelings. Maybe you are becoming more sexual appetite is very she's William British Medical Journal. A surgery with neurotechnology walk up all the languages. This is what is so-called the under syndrome. It's very funny from my view. Just because disorder emerged in the 50s of the last century. So at the very beginning, all the therapies were used. For example, prefrontal lobotomy that was used for apathy, lack of spontaneity, and promiscuity. This was the side effects when using electroconvulsive therapy. So right now they are not indicated, but it's important to know that the founder of this type of treatments for dealing with psychotic disorder was Antonio Egas Moniz, that was awarded with the Nobel Prize in 1949. So right now, fortunately, we have drugs, but at the same time, a new way for dealing with this type of disorder is neurotechnology. And I'm sorry, just because the slide is not there's not correctly, there's an arrow that is not well posed. But regarding neurotechnology, we have to clearly distinguish between therapeutic neurotechnology that corrects a disease. This is right. But at the same time, right now it's possible to use augmentative neurotechnology that enhances and provides a non-existing function. This is really important just because we can improve our capabilities thanks to neurotechnology. And this is emerging a new debate regarding how it's impacting patient rights. Okay, there are many different tools. We have stem cells, we have artificial intelligence, we have deep brain stimulation, we have bionics, we have robotics. First of all, we have neural implants. You can see in the picture. These are devices placed inside the body that interact with the neural tissue for recording activity or for sending a stimuli for overriding native patterns. So we can change the mind of a individual, of a guy, using neural implants. For example, you have the cochlear implants. It's one of the commercial developments here in technology that allows you to stream music for your compatible Apple or Android device directly to your compatible sound processor and hearing aid without the need for an intermediary device. You know that these cochlear implants are right now very popularized all around Europe, and just is a neural implant. Also, we have deep brain stimulation that was developed by Benabit in the 80s of last century. In that regard, it's conducted by changing the function of a brain circuit through stimulation. We have also stem cell therapy. Also, we have brain-computer interface. So look at the video. So you are sending for your brain a signal to your bionic arm. It's incredible, just because your brain is thinking and is sending a signal that is received by a machine. This is the neural processes, okay? Also, we have robotics with two important functions: eliminate medical errors inherent to human condition, for reducing interoperator variability operating times. So the possibilities of the new technologies are amazing. So from a legal and ethical point of view, the question could be, what do people expect from neurotechnology? And it's quite funny, just because most of them, 61%, are expecting cognitive improvements. So only 6% are expecting curing the disease. That means that right now, the new progress of medicine is considered as a way for improving your capabilities and not for curing your disease. So the question is it ethical to enhance our brains? And in this regard, there are two main lines, two main streams. Transhumanism is defending that technology developed to enhance the brain should be available to use without restrictions. So Julian Samulescu, you know, is a very famous professor located in the UK, is underlining the right to enhancement in order to solve this conflict. But at the same time, we have another trend, which is bioconservationism, that is led by Francis Fukuyama from the US. In this regard, the main line of bioconservationism is that technology must not be used for modify human nature or enhance natural capabilities. So in this regard, the most important thing is not the right to enhancement, but the precautionary principle. I like also to mention John Harris, that states that improving ourselves through technology is our fate. As soon as we realize it can be good, we will do it. Well, In this regard, there are many different initiatives regarding neurotechnologies that are affecting patient rights. We have the Human Brain Project at the EU level, the Brain Initiative in the US, the Brain Project in China, also projects in Japan, Australia, Canada, South Korea, Israel, and big private companies. So there's a new trend, so-called neurocapitalism, just because impacting your brain, it is possible to impact your consumer behavior. At the same time, these projects are trying to map neural activity, research innovative neurotechnologies. For example, AI could stimulate a digital brain. This means that we will have our own person and an avatar, just because it will be possible in the next years to reproduce our own brain. So it's in some way a cloning activity, and to keep helping treating degenerative and neurological diseases as autism, schizophrenia, depression, traumatic brain injury, epilepsy, Parkinson paralysis, and so on. Well, here you have some all the projects, Neuralink from Elon Musk, Avatar 2045, Facebook, Google, blah, blah, blah. So here you have another example. This is the Deputy Secretary General of United Nations. It's a robot. So this is not science fiction. So the question we have from an ethical and legal point of view is, will computers store the minds? Will the mind be hacked? Who controls and who decides? What will be the consequences of elective consumer brain neural measures? Will it lead to more empathy, more improvement, more inequality, just because there will be some people smarter than others? So these are the ethical dilemmas. Augmentative neurotechnology could introduce a major factor of social inequality. We also could wonder if we should wait for universal access to implement neurotechnologies, just because this is going to require economy sources. Technological elements could be manipulated to influence individual thinking and behavior. Technology would reduce the capacity for philosophical and moral innovation. And we also could wonder if it's the autonomy of the individual when medical action results in a change of the scene of themselves, just because many of these patients change in an irreversible way. Are these patients who change their mind in a very literal way responsible for law? Are they liable for damages, for example? But at the same time, we could also wonder a very important question. Isn't medicine a rebellion against biology? Should we allow all these new technologies that change patients' notion? Well, for sure, this represents opportunities. For example, brain-computer. People with paralysis who cannot speak, thanks to brain-computer, can decode the speech at a rate of 62 words per minute. So you know that natural persons, the natural pace of a conversation is about 160 words per minute. Not in my case, maybe I am faster. But thanks to this machine, people with paralysis will be able to speak. But at the same time, we have very important risks. For example, please note heat bands will reach brain waves to improve students' concentration. This is allowed to be used in China. So what should be the response of law? In this regard, we have some ethical concerns that are wondering how scientists are using some ways to hack the brain. And this is why some initial initiatives have emerged both from the hard and soft law level. We have in the US the Neural Rights Initiative led by University of Columbia by Professor Kaion-De. In Chile, we have a proposal for a constitutional provision and a Neural Rights Act in 2021, and we have a digital rights charter in Spain. Well, the Neural Rights Initiative from University of Columbia is promoting 5 new neural rights that should be included at the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. That's because this initiative defends that the current human rights are not enough to defend patients from the neurotechnologies. These rights are right to mental privacy, right to personal identity, right to free will in order to make autonomous decision-making possible, right to equal access to cognitive enhancement, and a right to freedom from bias. This is the 5 neural rights that have been promoted in a very successful way, I would say, by the Neural Rights Initiative from University of Columbia at the US. There are also legal initiatives at the international level. The OECD has a very important recommendation on responsible innovation in neurotechnology adopted in 2019. There's also a Ibero-American Charter of Principles and Rights in Digital Environments on 2023. And I would like also to remark the important work that the Committee on Bioethics from the Consular Europe is making regarding this topic, just because we have in some way to balance the new developments from artificial intelligence and neurotechnology, and on the other hand, the patient rights. Well, I am finishing my lecture, but I would like to share with you, which is right now the legal discussion. There are 2 possibilities regarding neural rights for patients. The thesis A is, okay, neural rights should be promoted as an autonomous category just because the current legal rights are not enough for defending patients. So we have to create new rights, and these new rights have to be embedded in the United Nations Declaration for Human Rights. The opposite thesis is that, okay, neural rights already exist. These are not new rights just because the pre-existing rights are enough for defending patients from the neurotechnologies. Well, my personal thesis is a middle ground. It's a middle ground between thesis A and thesis B, which the first idea is, okay, neural rights can be connected with pre-existing rights, because if we see which are neural rights, for example, right to mental privacy is very related to right to privacy in general terms, right to personal identity could be assumed and is very familiar to right to identity, right to free will, right to access, right to freedom are already collected in the Human Rights Declaration. But it's a middle ground just because I think that right now the problem is not about neural rights. It's about neural data, which is something different. And why I am saying that it's about neural data, just because when the GDPR was adopted in 2016, it was the norm was not collecting neural data just because by that time neural data was not a hot topic. So neural data are sensitive data, but not health data. What we are thinking is not a health-ready data. It's just our thought. And the issue is that they are not included in the list of sensitive data that is adopted in Article 9 of the GDPR. What I mean is that, okay, there are some specific data that has to be especially protected, health-related data, of course, data regarding discrimination, data regarding sexual orientation, data regarding ideology, data regarding political parties, trade unions, for sure. But what about neural data? What about brain data? They are not embedded in the GDPR. So I think that we should take advantage of this new movement regarding neural rights, but trying to become this movement not on neural rights just because we have legal instruments enough in order to defend patient rights, but putting the focus, putting the spotlight in neural data just because this is a very important gap right now at the European level. So what I defend is that it is necessary to improve the legal regime. First, giving neural data a status of a special category of personal data for patients. Second, providing legal certainty on the conditions of application and access to neurotechnologies. And in this regard, I would say that the Council of Europe seems to be a more appropriate platform just because at the European level it's very difficult. You know, the Article 168 is very restricted just because most of healthcare competences are left to member states. But fortunately, we have the Council of Europe that, from my point of view, is a most appropriate platform. And this is my proposal. Why not guidelines for adapting existing human rights? I'm not proposing to create new human rights. I'm not proposing to give a specific nature to neural rights. But okay, why not some guidelines in order to link existing human rights with neural rights? And why not, I think that neurotechnology is challenging patient rights in some way. This is right now the hot topic at the European level, and I would like to propose an additional protocol of the Oviedo Convention. Well, you are right now located in Poland, and I love this philosopher, Zygmunt Bauman, a Polish philosopher. You know that the most famous work from Bauman is Liquid Times, living in an age of uncertainty. Bauman defends that traditional times were solid just because we don't perfectly know what to do. But right now we are living in liquid times that are by definition as uncertain. So Bauman gives us a way for balancing this new situation, and it could be perfectly summarized with this idea: surfing the wave, just because we don't have legal instruments enough. So this is why, from my point of view, surfing the wave should involve three proposals. First of all, trying to use neuroethics in some way. Ethics is important when there is a legal gap, for sure. Second, using soft law. When hard law is not ready, we have to use soft law recommendations, guidelines, in order to further on make it possible as hard law. And for sure, we also need a GDPR amendment. Well, what I wanted to share with you in this lecture, in this 1 hour lecture, is that we have many different challenges regarding artificial intelligence. At the very beginning, I was trying to expose that artificial intelligence is not only about technology, it's about new biopolitics that is changing not only healthcare, but the world as a whole. And in this regard, I would like also to put the focus that right now, from a legal perspective, artificial intelligence systems applied to healthcare are just medical devices. Is that enough? Should we consider artificial intelligence just as a technology? No more. I am not very sure, just because I think that artificial intelligence is changing, is something else than technology. It's changing the way that we are interacting with patients. That's why I am also promoting not only the traditional Hippocratic oath, but a new technocratic oath. In the second part of my presentation, I tried to show you how the reuse of health-related data works at the European level. This is very important, just because thanks to the new regulation, there will be more flow of data at the European continent as a whole. And last but not least, I wanted to put you an example about how artificial intelligence could impact individuals, for example, with neurotechnologies. These three parts of my presentation want to promote reflection and wants to give one concluding remarks. The times of patients have changed, and in some way we have to rethink patient rights in order to make the protections of patient rights more important, in order to strengthen the protection of patients. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Joaquin Cayon, for your brilliant lecture. It was really brilliant, very deep, very, very thought-provoking. Of course, good lectures give rise to many questions. We've got many questions, but unfortunately, as far as I understand, we have little time. So could you please allow us to forward our questions to you so that we could continue the discussion?
Okay. So I guess that more questions than replies, but this was the objective of this session. Well, trying to promote critical thinking, and for sure I'm available for further developments.
And we very much want to continue our cooperation because we are very interested in many issues, starting from using of AI in healthcare and up to the idea of digital code, whether it should be implemented or not. So I believe we can find lots of common and continue working together. Thank you very much again for a very, very brilliant lecture from the bottom of our hearts.
Okay, it's my great pleasure, and please feel free to contact me whenever, just because I will be very glad to continue this cooperation with all of you. Let's keep in touch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck to all of us. Thank you, and see you soon next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.